share with you the last spring I went to Valrie's, doing something with Valrie, maybe just stopping in and saying hi, I don't know, but anyway, I was in your office, and she started sharing what she was planning to do in the summer with her online class. And she offered the class on the course exchange, the Texas A&M system course exchange, and ended up having a huge reception. Lots and lots. How many students were in that class?
34 plus 3 independent studies at the graduate level doing extra projects and signing in, so 37.
So it turned to, and she was concerned about the class making. Well, it turned out to make, and this was all TAM-UCC, basically, course exchange students. How many?
Well, I had about, most of it was all TAM-UCC.
Yeah.
I had about 35 from here. I have 2 that I think we don't know where they came from, so it may have been course exchange.
So unexpectedly, a very popular course, but mainly because of her reputation. Students want to take classes from Valrie.
I don't know
and
about that.
She's tough, so it's interesting. You know, students typically don't just love to flock to, but this is a big crowd to go to this level of class, this part of the class. She was very excited because she was coming up with an innovative approach to doing this particular content online. And as she was showing it to me, I was just spinning with excitement and seeing that it was really her method, this cool approach, was applicable to almost any content, and that she should share this cool approach with this cool approach with us. I'm so excited to see this. Because she said, no, she's so hesitant. She said, let me find out. Would you, I said, would you invite her to present? She'll do this lecture series. It was last May, probably.
Right.
And she said, you know, I'm a little hesitant because I haven't tried it out yet. I don't know if it's going to work. So I checked back with her after the course was over, and she said, oh, man, did this work? This was great. And so, you know, I said, please present this. And so we're capturing it on video, and we'll share it with the campus, and I think people are going to be able to learn this cool approach. I'm very excited to really get a second look at it and an in-depth look at how students responded to it. Very, very, very cool. Please help yourselves to food. It's a casual meeting. You know, I think Valrie wouldn't be offended if you got up and got little treats stirring. There's enough here for us to have lunch if we like. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. It's going to be fun, and I've got my lunch right here.
Thank you. She said so many good things that I can't possibly live up to them all. So I'm like, well, I don't know how much of it was my reputation and how much of it was this and how much of it was that. Because I really am, this is really, it worked, and it worked well, and I think that has a lot to say about the course itself. And I don't know how much it has to say about me. I know I put a lot of time into developing it. But I was paying attention to what people were saying about their online classes. I was paying attention to what people were saying about learning in general ahead of time. And certainly, for me to, what I basically was synthesizing things from a lot of smart people. And this is going to address Tax 2 online. What could be more boring than tax, right? Mostly, what kind of student takes tax? It's an accounting elective. It's juniors or higher. That's going to be important because these are mature students that are taking these classes, and I think that has something to do with it. They're accounting majors, which means they're self-selecting into something they're already interested in. So I'm going to have an advantage here in teaching this class in that I'm teaching people who already want to learn. And so if you're teaching a course where you get the sense that your students don't want to learn, I don't know that it would necessarily work as well for you. These are people with CPA aspirations. If you're teaching something in your major, let me go back and say, this is something that may work very well for you. So choosing the right audience, choosing who this is for and who it's not, is going to be important here. So this may not work for less mature students. It may not work if somebody's out of major, and it may not work if if you generally have classes full of slackers. So I've got what I think are average students. They're juniors, they're not freshmen, they're not seniors, they're not graduate students. They're in major, but they don't necessarily like the tax portion of the major. And they're ambitious students. They're reasonably ambitious. They're not, I didn't get all super smart students. What I saw was I got a lot of people who kind of sort of got C's in my Tax 1 class, which is the prerequisite. And it was harder for them to make an A in this class, but many of them worked very hard and did. So I saw the learning of the bottom go up, as opposed to more top people self-selecting in. Does that make sense? CPA exam, a little bit about that, because when I did my testing, I wrote a lot like CPA exam questions are written. CPA exam, the uniform CPA exam is the exam that we give across all 50 states. Now, licensure requirements change by state, but the uniform CPA exam must be passed by all candidates. It's run by the AICPA, and a passing score is 75%. I pegged my level of knowledge to, can these people be CPAs? About 40% of people taking the uniform CPA exam pass a section at any given sitting. So again, I'm pegging kind of high here at the knowledge that I'm expecting my students to have. But it's an independent third-party peg, and it's a very useful peg. And for those reasons, I said that's the standard that I'm going to set for this class. About 1/4 of one of the 4 test sections is Tax 2. So it's a very important class for them to have. But it's not as much fun as, say, fraud accounting, well, because, I mean, it's fun to watch what people will really try and how they got caught. I mean, really. So it's less fun, and so we're trying to get people who are in an elective to choose a more useful elective as opposed to a more fun elective, and that's something of an uphill battle. Now, this section focuses on learning and applying the law, and that's important because the law does not make sense a lot of times. Go figure, something written by Congress that doesn't make sense, right? So the law does not make sense a lot of times. If what you're trying to teach is critical thinking, you may want to use a different approach. Does that make sense? I haven't tried a critical thinking class like this, but there's some critical thinking. I don't want to be responsible for starting the rumor that tax accountants don't think. But you know, there is much more learn the law, apply the law, than be able to reason into or something out of this. I had about 2 students who I think came from course exchange because they weren't in my Tax 1 classes. I don't know that for sure. And I'm going to start with the problem, an excerpt from The Problem with Online Courses by Mark Edmondson. He says basically online courses are bad. They're okay. They will never be great. Here's why. It's a one-size-fits-all endeavor. It's a monologue. It's not a dialogue. You don't know their moods and their enthusiasms. The classes address no one in particular. There's nothing you can get from this class that you can't get from a good book on the subject. Students and teachers don't come together to create a vital community. It does not create intellectual joy. It's sterile and it's abstract, and everybody is more lonely. I like this article. He raises a lot of good points. And when I developed a class, another accounting class, online in a very short time period for MBA students, I got the sense that to some extent, to some degree, it had some of those failings. In other words, my course was okay, it was good, but it wasn't great. And I would rather teach a great course. But as I thought about this, well, this is often true, it does not have to be true. In fact, online courses in some cases can have an advantage. We're going to talk about, for example, one size fits all. When I'm teaching in class, I'm trying to keep everybody in class learning at the same pace as the norm. And that norm is derived, for example, based on how much we have to learn in a given semester. So everyone has to run at the same pace. And if you're faster, I'm probably boring you. And if you're slower, you're struggling to keep up. When we do, the way I set this course up, to look at the one-size-fits-all endeavor, I'm going to give you all the information you need. I'm going to give you a 3-hour lecture in generally about 35 minutes. And I'm going to do so consistently with my Northeast accent, which means that I'm not taking one single breath. There's no pausing for questions. There's no pausing for absorption. because you have the mouse and you will pause it when you need that time. And you will rewind it when you need that time. So if you can learn this in 35 minutes, have a nice day. My break kids can be in and out on the subjects that they are bright about. And if you need to crawl through this 17 times, let me know that you're crawling through it 17 times. I might be able to talk to you a little bit and maybe make it, 14 instead of 17, but you can go at your own pace. So one of the things that this online course does, for example, is it tailors to your learning speed. It will tailor to your moods, and we'll go over through some of these things. So I basically threw out the model where I was taking my in-class subject matter and putting it online at the same rate, at the same speed, in the same way. And I said, if I were born today, I'm so young, if I were born today with this technology, how would I maximize learning? Well, I made some assumptions. I think today's students admit to anyway, having shorter attention spans than what many of the older students had. And they are used to constant interruptions. I had given up on students reading the textbook before they come to my class. I have required it for years, hasn't worked yet, haven't met anybody it has worked for. Legendarily back in the day it took place, I'm not even sure I did it when I was in college. So I go through this and I say, look, do the lecture first. I'm going to tell you what's most important. Then go back, get more context by reading the book. I am assuming our students are technologically savvy. I'm assuming all of our students want an A. They're in college. They're ambitious. They're used to being told they're doing well, and they want to do well. They'll work to get it if they think they can get it. But I provide for an outlet for people who just want to get by. I did have one student tell me one time since I've been here that D is for diploma. Technology allows me to give multiple unlimited versions of the same exam without a lot of extra work, and it allows for immediate automatic grading of exams. So I'm going to set up my course, metaphorically speaking, like a pausable on-demand movie, rather than a TV show that starts at 7 and ends at 7:30 with very strict timing and very strict commercial interruptions. And I'm shifting the pace, I'm shifting responsibility for the course pace to students. You have the pause button, use it. You have the rewind button, use it. Okay? I had originally tried to do a fall Tax 2 in 2011. The course did not make. And it's an important course. And that was my motivation. People need to have this material. They're not opting in. What can we do differently? So I said, well, the goals of learning cannot change. This cannot be a dumbed-down course. But how can we leverage technology to make it both more attractive to students and hopefully also increase their learning? And I'd like to eventually take this to a broader audience. I would like to take it to more online course exchanges. If we ever get to the point where we market courses one by one, I'd like it to be broadly marketed. Bloom's Mastery of Learning, and this is why I could stand up here with a course that I'm proud of and that is very successful and still keep my blonde credentials as not being like smart or a genius or anything, because Bloom's Mastery of Learning, Bloom way back in the day said, spend as long as it takes on the basics. Get those basics down. Use frequent tests to see if the basics have been mastered. And once the basics are mastered, the rest of the material tends to be absorbed more quickly. And that's how this course is set up. This is long. You have this in your slide, in your handouts. Identify all important course material. What do you basically need to know? And this is true for any course that you would want to develop. First, what is the goal of the course? What specifically, point by point, do you want to know? How important is it that people know it? Now, I made a mistake, and I point out my mistakes all the way through here so that you don't make the same mistakes I did. I broke it down into 3 categories, and it should have been basic, medium, and difficult, and I labeled the first one easy, and it's not necessarily that it's easy, it's that it's basic, and if you don't know it, you will embarrass you and me. So these are essentials. They're not necessarily easy concepts, but they're essential concepts for CPAs. Because they're essential, you must pass the essential classes with a 100%. There are 104 questions in the essential sections. If you get 103, you failed. Now, the 104 questions are spread over 13 different tests. The shortest test is 1 question long. The longest test is 19 questions long. They run about 7 questions each. So if you get 103 out of 104, you can go back and take that 7-item test over until you get a 7 out of 7. But you must get all the basics down to pass. Questions?
Do you do that online? Like it's like a quiz that they take online?
Yes. Yes, and it scores right away, so you know your percent. Yes.
And then you have the opportunity to retake.
You retake. Now, the way that I set up the test is the questions are randomized, the answers are randomized, and if there's a formula, something you need to work out. In the first test question you get, it might be what is 3 plus 2? The next time you take it, it might be 4 plus 7. So the numbers, the answers will change up, that kind of thing. Yeah, yes.
And you did it in Blackboard.
And I did it all in Blackboard. I did it in Blackboard because it was better than the way our Connect Plus was set up in some strategic ways. So they tend not to, they're not as good about dividing out what is difficult versus what is essential. They tend to look at difficulty level as how hard is it for someone to learn, not how essential is it for them to know. Does that make sense? And so I kind of rate it based on how essential something is for you to know. It was 100% for the basic material, the pass rates for the medium material, and the more obscure material, the pass rates go down. Okay. And overall, they're weighted so that if you were to pass this course with an A, you would pass the CPA exam, which is considered to be an A in the field. And then I went back through and I said, find the best textbook. I found the best textbook. It wasn't an exact match. I tied the material to the textbook chapters as much as possible. I had 3 topics for which I had no chapter material at all, and I just did the PowerPoints and said, look, this is what you need to know in these 3 areas. And then I color-coded my PowerPoints. And there's actually an icon with crayons at the beginning of each of my chapters. And it said, look, the basic material's in black. And I didn't switch this around. Lauren said, switch it around because black diamond is the hardest skiing and green is the easiest. And I'm like, but I want to encourage them to go for the A. So I want to portray danger if you don't know this. So a slide may have black, it may have brown, it may have green on it. The black is the basic material. The brown is the medium. The difficult material is the green. And here's what you know. If it's on the slide, you're going to be tested. What's on the test? Everything. Okay? Everything that's on the slides is in the test. Now, you don't know how I'm going to test it, but you know you're going to be tested on it. And I divided up the tests into basic, medium, and hard. So you could go through a set of slides and do all the basic material first, get your C, then decide if you wanted a B. Or you could do all the corporate formation questions, the basic, the medium, and the hard. Then move on to corporate operations, the basic, the medium, and the hard. And you know what's going to be on each of the 3 tests, the basic, the medium, and the hard, because it's color-coded. Okay. Questions?
So cool.
Okay.
And you know, it addresses the Tinto expectations issue where students really benefit from very clear expectations.
Yes. Yes, it does. And I wanted there to be absolutely no question what I was testing. A, it's everything, and B, you know what test it's going to go on, you just don't know how you're going to be tested on it, that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. And they appreciated that, and it worked for them, and it really did help them learn. I wrote and keyed tests. When I turn in my tests at the end of the semester, I normally turn in 3. And when I turned them in for this class, I turned in 29. And our administrative assistant wrote me back and said, are you sure this is right? And I'm like, do you have 29 of them? She said, yes. I said, then this is right. You know? Which is going back again to Bloom's, test frequently, test a lot. I had 2 kinds of questions. I had multiple choice, which is a guess rate would be 25%, 1 in 4. I had some mark all that apply, and if you guessed, your odds of getting them right are 1%. So on any given question, your odds of getting a question right are between about 1 and 25%. And that's assuming you know nothing about the material. I'd write a question, I'd put in the right answer, then I'd put in the 3 most popular mistakes. So if you knew a little bit about the material, your odds actually could have gone down to less than 25% because the answers could confuse you in that sense. Questions? Okay. I explained this system, and I set out lesson plans by desired grade. This is what you should be doing if you want the C. This is what you should be doing if you want the B. This is what you should be doing if you want the A. Pick one. I did PowerPoints and I did voiceovers. 2 of my colleagues in business teach at 2 other universities, and they do PowerPoints, but they don't do voiceovers. They found voiceovers to be unpopular. They said no one wants, on an online class, they want efficiency. No one wants an hour-and-a-half lecture. And that may be true, but again, I would do an hour-and-a-half lecture in 35 minutes. You pause and space it out. You're done when you are done, which is at a different time than when your friends are done, probably. I'm assuming no one's having viewing parties for these. I did the syllabus and I cross-checked it. We are supposed to have 45 hours of in-class, 2 times that, 90 hours out of class for the state requirements. My A comes in at 145. Of course, the B comes in at less, the C comes in at less. So we provide everything that ties to the state requirements, and people can opt to slack off, but it's there. And so here's one of my sample slides. Usually it has background behind it, but I wanted to show you a sample content slide and how it would be color-coded. Okay, and how it would come up in pieces, but you could click through very quickly if you understood it already because you had a background in that area, and where you would not click through it quite so simply if you wanted to take more time. This is a sample easy question. 23 company splits into 2 companies, 20 company and 3 company. Shareholders who had stock in 23 company redeem the stock for shares in both individual companies. How is this treated for tax purposes? I wanted to emphasize that the easy was a misnomer, and I did it all the way through the class. Basic or essential is a better label for this. This is a typical question. It's not particularly hard. It's not particularly easy.
Yes, it is particularly hard.
Here's sample lesson plans for week 1. I had 5 weeks. Some of my weeks were longer than others. In other words, I didn't take 135 and divide it by 5. I said, well, so some weeks are over the limit, some weeks are under the limit. And I'm telling you, well, I expect you to look at the syllabus. I expect you to do this. This is the stuff that would normally be done in class. This is the stuff that would normally be done out of class. You're going to be spending 35 in the first week, about hours, and then overall we show how it totals to the 145. We give time for reading, we give time for quizzes, we give time for emails, and we give time for homework on CourseSmart, that kind of thing. Again, 104 questions, essential. If you are coming to class 5 days a week, or 4 days a week, for 5 weeks, that's 20 class days. That's about 5 essential things per day. Miller said the magic number is 5 plus or minus 2 of what people remember. So I'm pegging this to 5, and it works out well. There are 11 medium tests with 95 questions, but you only need to get 75% of 95 questions right, in addition to the C work to get a B. And Bradley, you look like you might have a question.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are 5 difficult tests with 43 questions. I originally pegged that at a 50% pass rate because mathematically the course was in balance with a 75% pass rate for the CPA exam. I'm bumping that up to 60%, and I'm going to ease into 70, I think, if the 60 works this next time around. Tests are timed, about 3 minutes per question. You can think that you can do it open book and not study. You saw the sample easy question. Look that one up in 3 minutes. Hey, do that 7 times. You know? Not looking likely for you, so you do have to know it. Again, tests can be taken as often as necessary. And I really want to take a minute here and compare it to my regular testing. In class, I'd have 3 tests, and an hour to an hour and a half test would give me 30 to 33 questions at 3 minutes apiece, or 95 questions overall. Now the thought is they'd have to know everything because they didn't know what I'd want to test. But it's possible you could know a lot about something and you might get lucky. It might over-represent what it is you study. So you could get an A with 90% of about 30 to 33 questions. You could get about 86 right for an A, 76 right for a B, 67 right for a C. In a normal class. In this class, you do not get the C unless you get all 104 questions, essential questions right. And if you want the B, you're getting 176 questions right. If you want the A, you're getting 188 questions right. I've more than doubled the testing. I've more than doubled the level of knowledge you need to demonstrate in order to get the A. Students self-paced. I was kind of tracking them. After the first few days, I tracked them every day. I had some that started early and finished early. I call them my race cars. I had some that did so much work every day, and that was it. And they were my marathoners. And this is where my children say I have to go through and find another, a better metaphor. But I had some, I thought going into the last week of class, I was going to flunk more people than I have ever flunked in any course ever. And I had some people who either didn't get it or didn't do it until the deadline was up. I had a lot of those.
And then they did.
But then they did. But then they did. And I could go in and I can watch how much time they're taking on the test and say, oh, that's about right. And so even if the other internal controls, like I'm randomizing the questions, I'm randomizing the answers, you're getting different numbers in formulas, that kind of thing. Even if you got around those, it became very difficult. You still had to take the time I could see how much time you were taking in the test, and I believe that it was, they were legitimately not. If they were cheating, they weren't cheating much. Does that make sense? I want more controls on cheating, but I didn't have the problem as much as I expected to have the problem, insofar as I could tell. So here's my grade breakdown. I had 37 students. This includes 3 master's students who said, please, I wish this was in my undergraduate program. And we said, okay, we can put in extra projects where you do a tax return, some tax returns, and you do this. And so, but they did the basic Blackboard course plus some extra projects. I had 1 D. I had 1 person who got a C and said, I'm out.
That's so cool.
I had 2 more C's who said, let me try the B, and then they gave up. So, 33 grades left, right? This is what I'm talking about. It brought up the bottom. I had 1 person who said, I got my B, I'm done. Would not even look at the A material. I had none who said, I'm going to try the A, and then gave up. I had 32 A's in this course.
Yes.
7 of them tried the A, and as soon as they got the A, they were done. Running for the door, okay? 25 of my 32 A's, 78%, took at least one test beyond what they needed to take, already knowing they got the A. They got more learning still. And I think this is the highest rate of, oh please, let me take more tests that I've ever had in classes. So we needed 220 points to get the A. 30 points was essentially an extra test. And anyway, so I was very pleased with that. They needed 50% of the A material to pass the exams. As soon as they got their 50, they were done. The average, taking out master's students, who are arguably higher achievers, the average undergraduate student got 73% of the A material right. They did not stop. They kept going. Questions?
Can you speak a little bit to, perhaps intuitively to some extent, to before this course design, what would that breakdown be typically?
I would have about half my class in the B range, about a quarter of my class in the C range. So I'd be expecting to see 9 C's, probably 1 or 2 D's and F's, probably about 16 B's, and probably about 7, 8 A's.
This is quite a change.
So this is quite a change. It is quite a change. But in the regular in-class course, if you messed up on test 1, it's possible, if a third of your grade was terrible, it's possible you'd never do better than an 88. And if you're never going to do better than an 88, maybe I'll aim for an 80 and put the time into another course where I can do better. So once you do poorly on the first test, the rational gaming could lead you to the conclusion where you suboptimize the learning that you could achieve, right? And in order to maximize your GPA. Okay, that makes sense. In this course, you can always get the A. You're going to have to work harder, maybe. This course, you get a 0. And a monkey with a pencil can get like a 25%. But you get a 0 on the first exam. Take it again. Work your way up to a 20. Then a 40. Eventually you have to get that 100%. Take it again. Talk to me. Let's talk about what's not getting through. Let's get past those stumbling blocks. But that A is never out of reach as long as you're willing to keep working. And I think some of it, too, is they get in the habit of keep working. And that's a good habit for them to be in. My first A came in on June 14th in 10 days. That person told me they were exhausted. But I'm okay with that. The second one came in 15 days. They seemed somewhat exhausted. So you see we're 1, 2, this is 5, 6, 7, 12 of them came in like the first 4 weeks. And this is what I'm saying. I thought I was going to be flunking a lot of people. They're responding, I think, in part to the deadline, and they really did pull it during the last week of class. I want to go back, though, and address the earlier New York Times article. I think one of the successes here is we increased student flexibility, and that enhanced learning. You can study anywhere you have a Wi-Fi connection. You can study during your most productive hours. If I have class at 8 a.m. Monday through Thursday, and you're not a morning person, I'm not a morning person. I can show up for class, but the brain does not go on till like roughly noon. And I really do think, they check driver's licenses more carefully for older people. And they put certain restrictions on certain driver's licenses. And I really do think there should be one on mine that says, do not let her drive before noon. Do not let her operate heavy machinery. Do not let her teach. Okay, so, but I know that about myself, and when, where possible, I opt into night classes where the early birds tend to start to fade. Regardless of what kind of person it is, regardless of when your productive time is, you can study then. You must master all the basic material. There's no sliding through where I got 70% of the basics and now I'm supposed to build on that. There's no building on the shaky foundation. There's no mystery, as you said with Tinto. There's no mystery as to what's going to be on the test. If it's on the slide, I'm testing it. And our AB students can be generalists or specialists. You can get all the questions right in corporate operations, formations, liquidations and reorganizations, and you can kind of at the A level, not at the C level, but at the A level, you can kind of skimp a little bit on multi-state taxation or on exempt entities if that's not your thing. Or you can know 75% of everything. It's up to you. So you can be a generalist or a specialist, and this helps people that are already out there that are beginning to work and choosing their specialties and careers. You can take your tests on good days, and you can study efficiently in the sense that this is paced however you want to pace it. And it paces to your learning speed, not the class norm. Early student reviews. When you finished early, and remember there's a limited number of these people, you got an email from me the day after you finished that said, you've earned the A. Continue to study until you're happy with your level of knowledge. Since your A is done, please take a few minutes to tell me how the course can be improved for the future. Anything I can do between now and the end of the course is especially welcome, but all comments about what to keep doing and what to do differently are appreciated. I put these in so that you can see what people actually wrote me. I did not edit them, so they have misspellings. They have sometimes bad verb tenses, things of that sort. But the responses were generally good. The regular system reviews, 11 out of 34 completed the regular system review. On a 5-point scale, my overall mean score was 4.830. I thought with the number of grades, the number of A's that I gave, I would be accused of giving an easy course. Because that's a lot of A's. Not everyone can be that smart. It says my instructor graded my work fairly and consistently. The computer did that. I just plugged it in. My instructor set high standards and challenged me. 5.0. Every single person that filled it out said, yes, this was a tough course. So that, plus the earlier validation that people were studying beyond what they needed to study, tells me that, that the rigor was there, that I did not sacrifice rigor in the way that I set that up. And they also felt that they would email me questions at all kinds of hours, and if my phone was there, I would answer them at all kinds of hours, especially if it was a relatively easy thing to answer, Standing in the checkout line of HEB, it's either like answer their question or read the tabloids, and clearly one's better for both of us. The 3 lows that I have, full disclosure, my instructor created a classroom atmosphere that was productive and conducive to learning, and there was, I kind of would have thought this would be lower still, because I don't know, I would like to think that what I did was productive and conducive to learning, but I don't know that I did it in a classroom setting. I tried to address where you were at, and where you were at, and where you were at, and where you were at. And that's less of a classroom thing. Does that make sense? That's like a parallel tutorial thing. My instructor demonstrated respect for individual differences. You're online, I don't know your race. I don't know your religion. It doesn't factor in here. So this is low, and I expect it to be low.
Now, what do you call low? Those are great scores.
Well, these are my 3 lowest scores.
So that's probably that probably represents one person, I'm going to guess.
Well, I think it's several people giving me a 4 as opposed to one person giving me a 1. Does that make sense? So, whenever possible, my instructor utilized a student-centered approach. I thought I did. I like the mean on that, but it was one of my lower scores. The things I liked most about this course were, and I liked the one in yellow the best, so I highlighted it. Self-paced, but not ignored, because I would talk to them. Every day I go in and I'd see how far they had gotten. And every week, if you were one of the ones that was not keeping up with where I thought you should be, you got an email from me saying, hey, I kind of thought you'd be farther along. What's going on here? And they would write back, oh, but somebody just died in my family, or oh, I've got a really big project in another class, but I've set aside this Saturday and Sunday to do it. I'm like, okay, so there's a plan, right? You're telling me there's a plan to pass this course. Oh, yes, there's a plan. And if you told me there wasn't a plan, we'd talk about, well, how do we get a plan? So there was the nudge if you were behind, and there was the attaboy or attagirl if you were ahead on these. The vocal over the PowerPoint, I had wondered if that would be any good. And it's very different for me to see you and talk to you than for me to talk to a microphone. And so I felt my lectures were stiff and wooden, especially at the beginning. And so and understand that my daughter does a lot of things in front of the camera. And I know by comparison, mine weren't as good. So I wasn't, I still don't know how happy I am with those. So I was glad to see that they liked that particular feature. Things I liked least. Online took away the as-you-go immediate feedback to questions. So they did not like that this was an online versus an in-class. The last one, they would have rather have had this in class. The things I would change about this course, they told me I should use the discussion board, and I didn't. And I think if I would have used the discussion board, that would have also created more of a classroom attitude, or atmosphere rather. Okay? In addition, there's some additional comments there. Other improvements. I'm wondering, gee, if they're that eager to learn more, should I clearly label and put some challenge problems in there? So I'm considering that. I'm considering putting another module in there, 7-question module in there that's not in the original courses. This would take our course beyond any course in Tax 2 that I've seen taught at the undergraduate level. Right now I'm pushing the limit with how much content I've got in there compared to other courses at other universities. And I'm like, well, having pushed that limit, maybe we step over it just this once and see how it works. I am going to raise the pass rate. I'm going to deliver this as a Jan-mester course, which is, again, a risky thing to do. But I'm going to do a Jan-mester this 2013. And I'm raising the pass rate at first to 60% for the A. And then I think I'm going to go to 70% if that works out. Oddly, they like it when I rant about something. There are places in the code that aren't logical. And sometimes I will get into a rant mode and I will say, this particular code says this. I don't know why. I've never looked it up. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I will go on as to why it's ridiculous, how it could be done better, how it's probably a product of some political backroom compromise back in the 1960s, but we're stuck with it now. And I would have thought that would have been killing time or taking time out of their efficiency. And so that they would dislike that, but they tended to like the topical rants a lot more. If I could get better content from my publisher, the publisher's website was more stable than Blackboard's website last summer. But I'm not getting that. I'm not getting... Now my publisher's website is getting to be iffy, so I think it's just the nature of all technology. Here's my wish list. I think we were good on cheaters every way I know to catch them short of sending them into a secure site. I've done. I'm waiting for the day when we can retinally scan. So there. Yeah. I have Apple. I like to FaceTime, with my students, but not all of them have Apples. So that's on my wish list, and I'm kind of watching that. Yes.
So we need to show you WebEx.
Okay.
Because WebEx allows you to do that.
Okay.
It's free for you, and it's very expensive software, but we own it.
Excellent.
So we need to show you how to do that. You just put all your students in, and then you can FaceTime with them.
Excellent. Excellent. I'd like slide-by-slide feedback. I'd like to know how much each person is spending on each slide. I wrote all my test questions, and if it was not in a formula base, I wrote the 3 most common mistakes as distractors, because that's a higher level of learning. I can't do that on a formula question. If my question is 3 plus 2 equals, then I can put in 5, but it chooses in the formula, it chooses 4 other random numbers. I want answer B to be 3 times 2, answer C to be 3 minus 2, answer D to be 3 divided by 2, that kind of thing, to see if you can differentiate addition from other similar common functions, for example. And I don't have the opportunity, in the way Blackboard's currently structured, to define distractors in a formula form.
So my understanding is that this service package that you're going to get supposedly this month. No, it won't be this month. It will be for next spring. Well, we already have it. We just haven't put it up yet because it takes bringing the system down. We're trying to do that.
Excellent. Excellent.
I hope it's true. This is what we were told by Blackboard, and they said it's so much more powerful than anything. I know what's used to be able to do that.
Right.
Well, my understanding is that we will be able to do that now.
Great. Great. And I'd like to stream some things as well. As we are, I don't feel like I'm missing a lot from this, but there are some things sometimes that we put things in, like what's in the news. Is anyone here a fan of Chris Rock? About 4 years ago, Chris Rock came out with a YouTube video, and the video said basically, we don't need gun control, we need bullet control. Every bullet should cost $5,000. I'd blow your head off if I could afford it. You know, I'm going to go get a job. I'm going to save for it. But if bullets cost $5,000, we would have no gun control problems. Well, last week, the city of Chicago came out and said, we're going to start levying a tax to make bullets more expensive. And my first question was, are you going to set them at $5,000? Because I knew Chris Rock had done the exact same gig like 4 years ago. Answer, no, they're going to put a nickel tax on bullets. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. But in Tax One and in the news, when we for tax consulting, planning, and research, I show those two side by side because how problems in life affect taxes and work their way into the tax code. You know, it really does kind of sort of, there's some pop culture overlay there from time to time, and there's the sense that we can use taxes to solve all of our problems. And I like to put those two things up side by side, and it would be helpful if I could stream it through. I can go back to the last one, I guess. Do you have any questions for me on how this was put together? Yes.
So how do you orient students to this notion of this is what you do to get to C, this is what you do to get to B, this is what you do to get to A?
It was in my syllabus, and it was very clear. And also, some of my Tax 2 students, many of my Tax 2 students came from Tax 1. So at the end of the semester, I asked who was taking that, and I said, I want to kind of let you know that this is what we're doing. And because I don't want any surprises with regard to expectations. You must get 100% on the essential questions, or you will not pass. You will fail. And that's a scary thing for them. But then, you know, you get into, well, you can take it more than once, and this is why we're doing it, and we're doing it so that you learn more. And then I repeated basically that same lecture in the syllabus. Now, if you also want to be, having gotten the C, or if you're sure you're going to do all the work anyway, then go on and get the D, go on and get the A.
So I can't remember, how did the one person get the D? What did they do to get the D?
They did not finish all the quizzes, but they finished most of the quizzes.
And they finished all the essentials. They had to finish all the essentials.
They did not finish all the essentials.
No.
They had like a 50% on one of their quizzes, and they did not go back and retake it. Well, they had taken it a couple times and they gave up. I know. This is a person who had harsh and perhaps even extreme personal problems and something had to give, and it happened to be this class. And I had another person who had some harsh things come up, but she was very dogged. She says, I'm getting the C and I'm stopping. And I'm like, come on, you're 2 tests away. And it was like 12 questions or something. I mean, come on. And she's like, okay, I've got to be in the hospital for something this week, and I'll do it while I'm at the hospital. And she did, and I was saying, if you need an extension, let me know. But she said, no, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it behind me. Okay. So, overall, I think the course was more successful than I thought it would have been. And I'm going to tweak it a little bit and offer it this Janmester and see if we can get similar results.
Is the Janmester 2 weeks?
It's almost 3. Almost 3.
But you had people that did that.
I did. Yes, and I had some that did so very little at the beginning and then played catch up. So I really had 2 sets of people that did that. Those that did it and finished early, and those that kind of looked like they were mostly waiting and then did it all at the end.
Did you do this as a blended format? Because it seems like one of the really cool things about the course is this testing and the essential knowledge. And would that work, you think, with sort of a regular classroom, but would we sort of modify that?
I think that I would have to think that through. I think that if you knew the basics were there, once you knew every person met the basics, that would be so. Because if someone were not keeping up with the blended classroom or the blended format, they still had everything they essentially needed to know to function without embarrassing themselves or the institution. Everything else there is gravy. So maybe
That would be the difficulty, because with this they can retest and be at their own spot. And if you were going through lectures every week, then they're ahead or behind, and it's kind of
right.
That would be what would make it really not work, or maybe not work.
I'm going to go with maybe not work because I'd have to sit and think about it. I'm not ready to give up on the problem yet. I'm not, but I'm not. The solution does not come immediately to mind.
Right.
You had a question?
Oh, I just was curious, when is the CPA exam offered for students?
The CPA exam is offered 8 times during the year. There's a January window. There's a January-February window, and then March is dark. Nothing is offered in March, and they go back and they analyze the results and they retool and like their questions before. We may give you 30 questions, 25 count. You don't know which 5 don't, and the other 5 we're pre-testing to see if they are good questions and should be retained or not. The AICPA has a really sophisticated system. And I'll tell you what I can tell you, but I am on I've written CPA exam questions before, and I help choose what goes on the exam for pre-testing, so there are some things I can't say. But you're on January, February, dark March, on April, May, dark June, and so forth.
I was thinking about your course and the offering of it, because it sounds like essential, like you're saying, for the test. And it's like centering it around the exam, like is what you're doing, it sounds like.
Well, June's a dark month, so you could go take it summer 1, which is when it was offered, and then come immediately out and take the July section of the exam if you had enough hours. And similarly, if we offer it in Janmester, that would give you January or February to take the exam, and with April being dark. So yes. Yes. The other thing that we're thinking about with regard to tax too is we have some foreign students that want to progress towards their degree. We have some people who kind of feel like the beginning of January is dead time and they'd like to do something with it. And I'm not, at least this Janmester, I'm not competing with a lot of other courses in the accounting major, so people who want to do this can focus on this, get 3 hours. Now, they're going to live, sleep, breathe this for 3 weeks. And it's at least 45 hours a week doing this. But if they're willing to do this, that helps them, and they're better prepared for the internships during tax season, which really start gearing up about the time our Janmester stops. I'd like to, and I don't know how to do this, I'd like to market to our firms locally for those who never did take tax too and just kind of learned enough to get past the CPA exam to get by. I'd like to market it so that they could brush up on their skills, get continuing education up for it, and use it for tax season, then sit for the CPA.